Hi, my name is Selene. While I was fighting cancer across state lines, my brother-in-law drained $3 million from my accounts, forged my signature, and told the family I'd lost my mind. They sold my father's piano, emptied my childhood home, and called it necessary. But what they didn't know was that I had a security camera still running. And in court, when I played what it caught, Cal collapsed to his knees. What did they say when they thought no one was listening? And what did they leave behind in a house they thought I'd never return to? The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into my driveway in Eugene, Oregon. My little blue car hadn't been touched in weeks, and the layer of dust on the windshield reminded me how far I'd been. San Francisco wasn't just distance, it was time, and that time had cost me. Chemotherapy had taken most of my strength, but not my mind. That was still mine, or so I believed. I stepped out of the car, inhaling the early October air. The leaves had begun to fall in patches, curling on the pavement like the remnants of something once whole. The front porch light was off, the mail piled in its box like nobody cared anymore. And maybe no one had. This house, my house, felt different, like it had been visited too many times by people who didn't belong. Sliding the key into the door, I hesitated. A chill slithered down my spine, not from the air, but from a feeling I couldn't name. The kind that comes before you open a letter with bad news or hear your name called from a doctor with too much sympathy in their eyes. Inside, nothing was broken, nothing was missing, and yet everything was wrong. My slippers were no longer by the mat. The air had that faint scent of someone else's cologne, sharp, citrusy, unfamiliar. I walked through the living room slowly. The throw blanket I always folded on the couch was now half crumpled on the armrest. That was never how I left things. I reached for the light switch and paused. My hand hovered in the air for a second too long, like flipping that switch would confirm what I already knew. Someone had been here, and not just someone, family. A lump formed in my throat, but I swallowed it down hard. I didn't come back to mourn. I came back to reclaim what was mine. That night, after showering off hospital smell and long drives, I curled into bed and stared at the ceiling. And that's when I remembered. It was one afternoon during my third chemo cycle, my veins sore, my stomach churning from whatever they pumped into me that day. Elowen had shown up unexpectedly, wearing too much perfume and too little eye contact. She had a folder in her arms and that smile on her face, the kind you wear when you've rehearsed your lines. "I brought some forms Cal needs you to sign," she'd said, placing the folder on the side table next to my untouched ginger tea. "It's just routine bank stuff, you know, to keep things from locking up while you're out of town. He's handling it for Dad's accounts, too." I was too tired to argue. I trusted her. At least I used to. I scribbled my name, barely forming the letters. My hand had trembled from the nausea. I never even asked what was inside those pages. Betrayal doesn't always arrive like a slap. Sometimes it's handed to you in a manila envelope, tucked inside what you thought was help. 2 days later, I stopped by the bank to grab some paperwork I needed for my insurance reimbursement. A simple errand, until the teller gave me that look, the kind people reserve for confused old women or those flagged in a system. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, blinking at her screen. "You're not listed on this account anymore." "What?" My voice came out hoarse. "That's my account." She tilted the screen gently, showing me my own name crossed out, replaced with someone else's. And then she clicked on a digital signature. It was mine. Almost. The slope of the M was too smooth, the loop in the D too sharp. "I never signed that," I told her. "Well," she said with a half apology, "it's legally valid. Cancer didn't kill me. But in that moment, my family sure tried." I stepped out of the bank with a headache forming just behind my eyes. Every breath felt like dragging my ribcage through thorns. I didn't cry. Crying was for people who didn't see it coming. I just drove. Elowen's porch light was on when I got there, even though it was still mid-afternoon. I didn't ring the bell. Through the glass, I saw something that made my jaw lock, the leather chair from my study. It sat perfectly in her foyer, like it belonged there all along. I turned and left before she could spot me. No confrontation yet. That would come. For now, I needed silence. I needed distance. Back home, I stood in my father's study, the same room where he used to read old newspapers and play the piano when he thought nobody was listening. The bench was there, but the sheet music was gone. The room felt like a body missing its soul. "What else did they take while I was too weak to fight?" I whispered. Later that night, I opened my suitcase to unpack. My clothes still smelled faintly of antiseptic. As I moved my hand toward the bottom compartment, my fingers brushed something stiff. I pulled out my hospital wristband, still bearing my name in faded ink, and something else. A carbon copy of a signature page. I looked at it carefully under the desk lamp. It was faint, almost erased, but not entirely. My signature was there, but it wasn't the one I remembered. Something wasn't right. I didn't sleep much after finding the wristband and that carbon copy buried at the bottom of my suitcase. I kept replaying the image of my own signature, except it wasn't mine. It felt like waking up next to someone else's memory of you. Unfamiliar, but hauntingly close. The next morning, I drove to Marion State Bank. It was the same branch my father used to take me to when I was a teenager, back when we'd argue about checking versus savings, and he'd tell me, "Never trust a system you didn't help build." At the time, I thought he meant banks. Turns out, it applied to families too. The teller greeted me with a soft smile, probably trained that way. "Hi there, how can I help you?" "I'm here to get account records for Marwood 8346, I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "I need to submit reimbursement paperwork for medical expenses." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The smile faded slightly, just enough to shift the tone of the room. She clicked, paused, clicked again. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "This account isn't under your name anymore." I felt the weight in my feet first. "What do you mean it's not under my name?" I opened it. Her voice lowered, like she didn't want to embarrass me. "You're not listed as an owner on the account. It was changed a few weeks ago." "I was in a hospital a few weeks ago," I snapped, "and nobody asked my permission." She hesitated, then turned the screen slightly. "We have a signed authorization form on file." And there it was, my name, or at least a version of it. The R in Marwood curled too neatly. The M didn't dip the way mine always did when my hand trembled. "I didn't sign that," I said, cold settling into my jaw. "Well," she said with the same kind of customer service pity I used to hear when people found out I had cancer, "legally, it's valid." Outside, the sun glared off my windshield like it had something to prove. I sat in the car longer than I needed to, breathing through my teeth. I pulled up our family group chat, something I hadn't checked in weeks. I scrolled past old messages about birthdays, Elowen's book club invites, and Cal's charity dinners. Then I saw the photo. A group shot, everyone around a long dinner table, smiling. My mother's china set, my father's wine decanter. Cal at the head of the table, arms wide open like a damn pastor. The caption read, "So grateful for Cal's leadership. We've stabilized the estate for the next generation." I stared at the image. The seat where I always sat was filled by someone else. The frame had been cropped tight. I wasn't in it, not even by accident. Below the photo, someone had commented, "We did what we had to do." I tossed my phone onto the passenger seat, chest aching like the chemo never left. I wasn't erased by a court. I was edited out by a click. I texted Elowen, "We need to talk." No response. Later that afternoon, I drove by her house. Her garage door was open. Through the window, I could see into the foyer. My dining table, the one I inherited from Dad, with the burn mark from a Thanksgiving candle in 1996, sat in her front room. It wasn't just the furniture, it was the life that used to be mine, now neatly folded into hers. I didn't knock. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of surprise. Instead, I drove home, every mile tightening the knot in my stomach. At home, I went to the drawer where I'd kept all the estate paperwork. Contracts, account numbers, trust certificates. I'd stored them there since the beginning. Now, it was empty. All that remained was a folded receipt, dated 2 weeks after I checked into the oncology ward in San Francisco. It was from a document disposal service. Addressed to Cal Drury. On the back, in neat handwriting I recognized as Elowen's, a yellow sticky note said, "All cleaned up. It wasn't theft. It was removal, planned and executed." The next morning, I dialed Elowen again, straight to voicemail. I tried once more. Nothing. I sat on the edge of my bed for a moment, staring out the window at the rust-colored trees shaking in the wind. Something told me I wasn't just being ignored. I was being sealed out, boarded up like an old room nobody wanted to admit existed anymore. Out of impulse, I tapped Vera's number, my niece. She was 11 now, growing fast. I hadn't seen her since I left for San Francisco. She used to send me little videos of her science projects, her attempts at baking disasters. I missed that voice. The line clicked, and her young voice came through, soft and cheerful. "Hi, Aunt Selene." I felt a smile stretch across my face. "Hey, sweetheart, I've missed you," she giggled. "Mom said you were busy, with doctors and stuff." "I was, but I'm back now. Thought maybe I could take you to get pancakes this weekend?" Silence. Then came the sentence that sliced me open. "Mom says you don't want to be part of the family anymore." It wasn't said in malice. It was a statement, a line rehearsed, memorized, and delivered with childlike clarity. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because how do you explain to a child that you've been erased from your own story? "I have to go," she said. "We're going to the pumpkin patch." Click. I held the phone in my lap, every word echoing louder than the one before. The house felt colder. I remembered something Dad used to tell me when family dinners turned into whispered wars. People don't erase you with facts. They do it with retold versions. That day, I pulled out the old cedar box from the hallway closet. It still smelled like his cologne, citrus, tobacco, and wood shavings. I hadn't opened it since he died. Inside was a letter, yellowed and sealed. My name was written in his handwriting, scrawled with the exact same tilt he used to sign Christmas cards. On the back, it read, "Only open this if you feel truly alone." So I did. His words poured out like he'd been watching everything from the start. He wrote about his worries, that Elowen, blinded by comfort, might let Cal manipulate what he built, that my kindness could be used against me, that if I ever got sick, they'd find a way to make it a justification, not a tragedy. "Never let your illness become someone else's opportunity," he wrote. By the time I reached the last line, I was crying, not from surprise, but from the relief that someone had seen it coming. Someone had believed in me, even when I had forgotten how to believe in myself. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. That afternoon, I drove to our old family home. I hadn't been back since the memorial. It looked the same from the outside, paint fading, shutters a bit crooked. But when I walked the perimeter, I noticed the trash bins lined along the driveway. Inside one was something that stopped me mid-breath. My father's old woodworking bench, splintered, dusty, discarded like it meant nothing. He built our kitchen table on that bench. He carved Vera's name into a step stool when she was born. Now it sat beside broken garden tools and black bags full of leaves. "Grief isn't always about the dead," I whispered. "Sometimes it's for the living who buried you while you were still breathing." I stood there for a while, letting the ache settle. No more justifications. No more pretending this was all a misunderstanding. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. Later that night, back in my own home, I made chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen counter. The light from the fridge buzzed behind me. I opened my laptop to check my email, mostly junk, a few condolences from former coworkers who'd heard I'd come home. Then I saw it. Subject: "You should know what Cal did." No sender name, just a Gmail address I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, my pulse climbing slow and steady. I clicked. The email had no greeting, no sign-off, just a PDF file, a line of text, and the kind of silence that leaves your ears ringing. "You should check the county records. He used your absence well." The PDF was a scanned copy of a property transfer document, Marwood Estate, my father's house, my childhood, everything rooted in that name, transferred from my joint ownership to a single signature. Cal Drury. Dated mid-April. I'd been in bed, too weak to lift a glass of water without help, let alone sign away a legacy. The next morning, I called the county clerk's office, gave them my name, parcel number, all the details I still knew by heart. The voice on the line, polite but mechanical, said, "Yes, Ms. Marwood." The deed was amended in April. New ownership was recorded without dispute. New ownership? I repeated, already knowing. Yes, it lists Mr. Callista Drury as the sole title holder. I hung up. No thank you, no goodbye. Just the hollow click of finality. Later that afternoon, I found the envelope wedged in my mailbox. A cease and desist notice, printed on thick ivory paper. The letterhead read, Halberd Crown LLP, the kind of name that sounds expensive but non-existent. Dear Miss Marwood, it began, we represent Mr. Callista Drury regarding your recent defamatory claims and attempts to interfere with his lawful property management. Continued public mischaracterization will result in legal consequences. I read it twice. There was no address on the envelope, no phone number on the letter, just vague threats dressed up in corporate language. I Googled the firm. Nothing. No website, no attorney registry. I called Hannah, an old colleague from my finance days who'd transitioned into real estate law. She called me back 10 minutes later. There's no such firm registered in Oregon, Selene, or anywhere for that matter. Whoever sent you that letter doesn't want you asking questions. They want you afraid. Well, I said, they'll be disappointed. That weekend, I drove to the estate. I hadn't seen the house since Dad's funeral. Pulling up the driveway felt like rewinding time while knowing exactly how it ended. The hedges had been trimmed, the gravel re-leveled, but it wasn't care, it was staging. A for sale sign staked near the mailbox read, Historic Charm, recently updated, quick closing available. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. I stepped out of the car. The gate had a new lock. The door had a realtor's lockbox hanging from the knob. I stood at the edge of the front steps, not ready to press further. Then I heard someone behind me. A woman in jogging gear slowed her pace. Hi, are you the new owner? No, I said slowly. I grew up here. Oh, she blinked. I thought it was sold. Your brother-in-law said you'd moved to Florida. My mouth parted, but the words didn't come. He said what? She gave a small shrug. That you didn't want anything to do with the house anymore. Said he was handling everything. Of course he did. I thanked her, walked the perimeter. Every window stripped of curtains. The dining room bare. Not a trace of my mother's china cabinet or my father's framed degrees. Even the birdhouse Dad built in '92. Gone. On the back porch, I paused. Something caught my eye in the dirt. A footprint. The familiar tread of Cal's boots. He always wore those heavy-soled leather ones, even when it wasn't practical. I followed the prints to the edge of the deck, where they vanished into gravel. They'd thought I'd be too weak to come back. Too sick to notice. They'd forgotten one thing. I'd set up the security cameras years ago, when Dad had started getting forgetful. I knew where the backup SD cards were kept. And unlike the papers they forged, that footage didn't lie. That evening, back at my house, I opened the keychain box in the drawer next to my bed. Taped underneath the lid, exactly where I left it, was a slim plastic sleeve labeled Garage Cam, right angle. I held it in my palm, my voice steady. They forgot the camera. I didn't. I sat at the kitchen table that evening with the SD card between my fingers like it was made of glass. It was lighter than I remembered, insignificant in weight, but I knew it might carry the weight of everything they tried to bury. My laptop took its time. It always did. The spinning wheel mocked me, as if even the machine didn't want to see what I'd captured. But finally, the screen blinked to life, and the video file opened. The garage came into view. The camera angle was slightly crooked, exactly how I'd left it. Dust floated in the sunlight, cutting through the window, landing softly on the hood of Dad's old truck. Then, voices. First, his. She won't remember a damn thing. The meds take care of that. Cal. Calm. Confident. Elowen laughed, sharper than I'd ever heard her. I told you. She signs whatever you put in front of her. That's what sisters do when they trust you. They stood near the toolbox, sipping wine like it was a dinner party. I leaned in, watching them toast with the same hands that had torn my name off legal forms. You think she'll ask about the estate? Cal's voice again. If she does, we say she misunderstood. Blame the chemo brain. That works. The file ended with them walking out of frame, still chuckling. I sat there for a long time after it went dark. Then I opened a new voice memo file and hit record. This is Selene Marwood, I said, steady and clear. Today is October 16th. I am documenting a conversation recovered from a garage security camera that captures my sister Elowen and her husband Callista Drury admitting to knowingly manipulating me during active chemotherapy for financial gain. The timestamp matches the day they handed me the signature packet. This is evidence. I am not paranoid. I am not unstable. I am a woman with proof. I clicked save. Later that night, I sifted through the estate emails I'd archived months earlier. Things I had forwarded to myself before the chemo fog took over. A subject line popped out. Estate piano donation. Confirmed. I clicked. According to the email, the piano had been donated to a local charity supporting veteran music programs. No name of the charity, no contact, no signature, just a line about preserving legacy through sound. My father's piano wasn't a legacy. It was his voice. I had fallen asleep to that piano since I was 5. I pulled up eBay on a separate tab. A quick search, and there it was. I recognized the carved initials along the side of the mahogany, JM, 1968. The same brass pedals. The corner chip that Dad had refused to fix because scars tell a story. It was listed under a seller name I didn't recognize, but when I checked the return address, it linked back to the consulting office Cal used downtown. They didn't just steal the house, I muttered. They pawned my memories. I took screenshots, every angle, every word. Then I filed a fraud claim through eBay and emailed their legal compliance team. I sent them the security footage timestamp as context. After that, I sat back, cracked my knuckles, and opened a new document. This wasn't a letter of grief, it was a demand. I laid it all out. Names, dates, digital trails, receipts, audio. At the bottom of the letter, I wrote one line, centered, bold. You have 72 hours to return what's mine, or I'll bring it all into daylight. I copied the family group email. Every cousin, every spouse, every name on that thread. They'd see it. Whether they believed it or not didn't matter. The evidence would. My hand hovered over the send button, then my screen flashed. Incoming call. Elowen. I stared at it ring. My finger trembled over the mouse. I breathed in and answered. If this is about guilt, I said, I already recorded yours. The phone kept ringing. I watched it vibrate on the counter, lighting up with Elowen's name over and over, like her desperation might wear me down. It didn't. I let it ring twice more before answering, not because I was unsure, just because I wanted her to feel the pause. Selene, she said, her voice honeyed, careful. Can we please just talk this through, like sisters? I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the laptop screen where the SD card file still sat open like a loaded weapon. You mean like the dinner we had 3 months ago? I asked evenly. A beat of silence. Yes, she said slowly. That one. That was a difficult night for all of us. You mean the one where Cal said, and I quote, "She's drugged enough to sign anything? That dinner?" Her breath caught. It was small, but it was there. Selene, she started, tone shifting. I didn't know he was recording. He wasn't. I cut her off. I was. I reached across the counter and clicked play, held the phone close to the speaker, let her hear it, every word, Cal's smug laugh, her chuckle, the clink of their wine glasses. The part where they talked about how the chemo had made me compliant. The line stayed live for 20 seconds after the audio ended. Then she hung up. I stood there, phone in one hand, mouse in the other. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't accused. I didn't have to. The silence did it for me. The next morning, I contacted my oncologist's office. I requested my full medical file, the complete treatment chart, every note from every nurse, every consent form I'd ever signed. The nurse who answered sounded confused. Of course. Though, one of the newer notes says you've requested a third-party review of mental capacity? What? My heart paused. I didn't request that. Who added it? After a long pause, she said, "That note came from an admin portal outside the hospital network. Let me pull the source." 10 minutes later, I had the name of the user who added it, and the IP address that routed back to a law office tied to Cal and Elowen's financial advisor. They were trying to bury me while I was still breathing, and now they were trying to bury my credibility too. I forwarded the file to my contact at the Medical Ethics Board. Hannah owed me a favor from a shared client disaster years ago, and she took one look at the entry and said, "That's grounds for a data fraud claim." That night, I sat in my home office and opened a new folder on my desktop. I called it Control File. Inside it, I began dropping everything: screenshots, emails, scanned letters, notarized witness statements, audio clips. I didn't cry. I didn't even shake. I just worked, methodically, like I was drawing the blueprint to a house no one could tear down again. I called the notary service, paid for a mobile witness to come sign off on my affidavit regarding the altered medical notes, scanned the print copy and stored it 3 times, in the cloud, on a hard drive, and on a flash drive I slipped into the lining of my old leather purse. "They wanted to steal my mind," I whispered, "so no one would believe my memory. They would now." Just before bed, I opened a secure upload site and dragged the control file into place. I scheduled it to auto-send to 4 people if my phone went offline for more than 48 hours. I stood up, crossed the room, and looked in the mirror above the fireplace. I looked older, not in years, but in age. There was something in my eyes now that wasn't there before. "Next time they look at me," I said to my reflection, "I want them to see the version of me that has nothing left to lose." It started with a text from Laura. She and I hadn't spoken in months, not since I missed her retirement brunch. The message was simple. "Selene, have you seen this?" Attached was a link to a blog post titled, "Unstable Woman Claims False Ownership of Historic Eugene Estate." I clicked it. There was no author name, no comments allowed, just a flood of thinly veiled accusations, descriptions of my supposed erratic behavior, delusions of entitlement, and an obsession with a house no longer hers. The author even called me a long-term medical liability to herself and others. And there, halfway down the page, was a blurred photo of my hospital wristband. They didn't just want me quiet, they wanted to wipe me from the narrative, rewrite me as unhinged, mentally broken, dangerous. I dug into the source code, pulled the registration data. It was masked through a proxy, but metadata doesn't lie. After 20 minutes of cross-referencing old email headers and LinkedIn profiles, I found the connection. Chloe Andrews, a marketing intern from Cal's consulting firm. I remembered her. She used to brag about ghostwriting bios for politicians. I filed a formal takedown notice with the site host and contacted a media law firm in Portland for a defamation case consult. But I didn't stop there. I took screenshots of every paragraph, every image, every server tag, dropped them into my control file, labeled Digital Smear Campaign, OCT. "If they want war on every front," I muttered, "I'll give them legal, digital, and personal." The next day, an email from a law firm hit my inbox, this one from a real address. Attached was a new version of the Marwood Family Trust. The name Selene Marwood didn't appear anywhere. Instead, the document was now titled, Continued Marwood Stewardship Agreement, Callista and Elowen Drury. I stared at it for almost a full minute. They didn't just want my house. They wanted my lineage. I drove straight to the estate attorney's office. The same man who'd handled Dad's will, the same one who gave that eulogy about the family name living on. When I walked in, his eyes darted from me to the folder in his hand. "Ms. Marwood, I wasn't expecting you." "Apparently not," I said flatly. "You emailed me this version of the trust by mistake. Thought I'd drop in and pick up the original." He hesitated. "There's been some restructuring. We were told—" "By who?" He cleared his throat. "Mr. Drury's office sent notarized instruction while you were under treatment. I assumed you were aware." "Assumption," I said. is the mother of malpractice. He said nothing. I didn't move. Finally, he retrieved the archive binder, flipped to the printed trust Dad had signed in 2015. There it was. My name, in ink, right under his, listed as co-executor and primary beneficiary. I took out my phone and took high-resolution photos of every page. The attorney didn't protest. Later that night, I stood in my driveway, estate file in one hand, phone in the other. Cold air whipped through my jacket, but I felt fire in my chest. They rewrote the narrative, I whispered. I'll rewrite the ending. Inside, I turned on the desk lamp, cleared space on the kitchen table, and set up my camera. No makeup, no script, just me. I pressed record and spoke for 3 minutes, clearly, calmly, with images to back every word. I'm Selene Marwood. This is what has been done to me, and here is the proof. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just showed them. When the video finished uploading, I set it to unlisted. Shared it with 5 people I trusted most. Laura, my attorney, my therapist, 2 former co-workers who had once called me the most dangerous woman in a spreadsheet. I ended each message with one line: if anything happens to me, post this. Then, just before bed, my encrypted account pinged with a new message. No sender name, just this. They know you're fighting. Cal isn't planning to wait this time. Attached was a grainy screenshot. My car, parked in my driveway, taken from a high angle. I didn't flinch, I just stared at it, and whispered, "Come and see what happens when you push a woman who's already walked through fire." The invitation came on a Wednesday. Elowen's name, written in soft cursive at the top of the email, followed by a line that should have made me laugh but didn't. Family Council, a time to heal and speak with grace. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the community center where our mother used to run coat drives and church raffles. The place had a familiar smell, like folding chairs, lemon oil, and forced politeness. I showed up 10 minutes late, on purpose, let them sweat. The parking lot was packed, too packed for a family-only conversation. Inside, a semicircle of folding chairs had been set up facing a projector screen. Cal stood at the front in a navy suit, the same kind he wore to Dad's funeral, smiling too easily, hands clasped like a TED Talk was moments away. Elowen sat to his right, eyes scanning the room like she was searching for a way out before anything had even started. I walked in without acknowledging either of them, found a seat in the back, and kept my purse in my lap. My fingers rested on the USB drive inside it. Not yet. Cal cleared his throat dramatically. We love Selene, he began, using my name like it hurt him to say it. But her condition has unfortunately affected her judgment. We've been patient. We've tried to protect her privacy. But she's made accusations that leave us no choice but to respond as a family. He nodded toward Elowen. She stood slowly. We didn't want to do this publicly, she said. But we can't sit back while our integrity is questioned, not when she's taken this far. I waited until the murmurs began, the side eyes, the not-so-subtle whispers. Then I stood. No drama, no preamble. I walked to the front, ignoring Cal's attempt to speak over me, and without a word, connected the USB to the projector laptop. The video file auto-played. The audio was crystal clear. She won't remember a damn thing. The meds take care of that. Gasps echoed. Then Elowen's voice. I told you. She signs whatever you put in front of her. That's what sisters do when they trust you. Cal looked like he'd swallowed glass. Elowen had turned a shade of gray I didn't think was biologically possible. The room was dead silent by the end. I unplugged the USB and placed it back in my purse. They wanted public sympathy, I said, turning to the crowd. They got public silence instead. I left before they could speak again. I didn't need rebuttals. I had receipts. Out in the parking lot, I was halfway to my car when a woman called out to me. Ms. Marwood? I turned. She was in her 60s, hair in a tight bun, wearing a green cardigan. I used to live across the street from your family's estate, she said. I thought you should have this. She handed me a folded piece of paper, creased, faded, torn at the edges. It was in the trash outside your sister's house a few months back, she added. Something told me it wasn't meant to be thrown away. I unfolded it slowly. A note, handwritten in Elowen's loopy cursive. If she comes back, deny everything. Play the mental health card. Keep Cal in front. Dated a week before I returned from San Francisco. I didn't say thank you. I just nodded and put the paper in my bag. That night, back home, the messages started. One from Aunt Doris. We didn't know, sweetheart. I promise you, we didn't. Another from my cousin Marcus. They told us you didn't want contact, that you were not well. Each one cut differently, not sharp enough to kill, but enough to make me question how long people are willing to sit in silence when it protects them. Elowyn didn't send anything. Cal didn't need to. Because at 11:42 p.m., I got a text from a blocked number. You think this is over? Attached was a photo, my backyard, my house, taken from the tree line where no security lights reached. I stared at the screen, chest tight but hands still. He's not running out of lies, I said aloud, locking every window in my house. But I'm running out of patience. By sunrise, my inbox looked like the aftermath of a riot. Some messages were filled with love, people I hadn't spoken to in years saying they stood by me. Others were venomous, dripping with passive-aggressive pity or outright denial, but it was the voicemail that chilled me. Miss Marwood, the voice said, low and deliberate. Consider this a warning. For your own safety, we suggest you stop stirring things up. No name, no number. But I recognized the cadence. Cal's assistant, the one who always looked past me like I was a shadow in the hallway. I spent the next hour changing passwords, socials, banking, doorbell camera. I added a second lock to the gate and moved the pepper spray from my purse to my nightstand. I used to think you could reason with betrayal. Sit down, talk, be honest. But some mirrors only shatter when you finally admit you were never reflected in them to begin with. By mid-morning, I was at the Lane County Courthouse. I walked in with a copy of the original trust, my control file, and 2 notarized statements. The woman at the desk barely looked up. I need to file a protective order, I said, setting the folder down. And I want to petition to reopen the Marwood Trust, I continued, on grounds of fraudulent modification, undue influence, and medical exploitation. That made her pause. She took the documents, flipped through the signatures. Her expression changed. Then she handed me something I didn't expect, a printed press release. I scanned it quickly. Local charity CEO under state investigation for alleged misuse of donor funds. Cal's name, his face, his smug PR headshot now a headline. He was being investigated in an unrelated case, something involving siphoned money from a veterans nonprofit. By evening, the local news had picked it up. I watched from the couch, one hand around a mug of tea, the other gripping the edge of a blanket I barely realized I'd pulled over my lap. There he was, pale, silent, his shoulders hunched in the footage as he left the courthouse. Elowyn wasn't beside him this time. He thought he'd collapse me, I whispered. Turns out, he'd just exposed himself. The next day, I drove out to the estate. With the court's temporary access order in my hand, I pulled into the driveway slowly, tires crunching the gravel like they were afraid to break the silence. I hadn't been back since the day I'd found the footprint. Now, I came with legal weight. The door creaked open on the second knock. The house was hollow. No furniture. No framed memories. It echoed like a shell. In the backyard, I heard something, a faint whine. I followed the sound to the old garden shed. Inside, in a rusted kennel, was Dad's dog, Max, gray-muzzled, ribs visible under his patchy fur, eyes barely able to open. My throat clenched. I knelt. Max, I whispered. He limped toward me, tail wagging once before collapsing into my lap. I held him, swore under my breath, not at him, but at what they had left behind. I called animal rescue first, then I called my lawyer. Back inside, I walked through the house slowly. The family photos were gone. The shelves had been cleared with surgical precision. Every room had been emptied like they wanted to scrub me from the drywall. In the corner drawer of what used to be my mother's sewing room, I found one thing left behind, a folded photo of me as a baby, torn down the middle. My side of the picture bent back, like it had been hidden behind something else. I stood there for a long time. They wanted the house, I said aloud, voice calm. I remembered the home. As I stepped outside, twilight cast long shadows across the yard. I was halfway to my car when I noticed a vehicle across the street. Parked, engine running. It blinked its headlights once. My heart didn't race. I didn't run. It was the same car from the blurry photo I'd received days ago. Same make. Same license plate. The engine revved softly, then it rolled forward, slow, steady, deliberate, before disappearing around the corner. "They're watching me," I said softly. "Good." I turned toward the gate. I want them to see what happens next. The sky over Lane County Courthouse hung low and gray, like it knew what the day meant. Malis Corwin walked beside me, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. She had the kind of calm lawyers earn from handling other people's storms for too long. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was ready. The press lingered outside the courthouse steps, murmuring quietly, lenses half raised like they were waiting for confirmation this was more than gossip. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't need to. Inside, the courtroom was already filling. Some faces I recognized, some I didn't. All of them turned when I walked in. Cal sat at the defense table, hands folded, suit crisp, jaw tight. He didn't look at me. Elowen sat 2 rows back, eyes on the floor. She held Vera's hand like it was the only real thing left in the room. When the judge called the case, Malis stood. "Your Honor, we intend to demonstrate that not only was the estate trust illegally modified, but that my client was intentionally misrepresented through forged medical claims and subjected to property theft during her most vulnerable state. We laid out everything. The SD card, the time-stamped footage, the side-by-side comparison of the original trust and the one they submitted to the court. Every altered clause, every signature out of place. Then came the screenshots of emails, the metadata from the fake law firm letterhead, the note from the neighbor, and the audio from the dinner. I took the stand last. The room was silent as I testified. I didn't look at Cal. I looked at the judge. I answered every question clearly, with documents in hand. When they asked how I knew my signature was forged, I pulled out the medical reports showing I had been under heavy medication the day those papers were signed. When they asked about my mental capacity, I quoted my own doctors. And then, Malis brought in the forensic analyst. He projected a document on the courtroom screen. "This signature," he said, tapping the screen, "was likely manipulated. The pressure on the pen stroke is inconsistent with the natural hand of the signer. Furthermore, there are signs of tracing. Notice the tremor line near the loop." He turned toward the judge. "Based on the patient's medical records, any signature made at this time should have shown irregularities consistent with medication tremors. This does not." That was it. No theatrics, no raised voices, just fact. When the judge recessed for lunch, I sat quietly. Cal stared forward like someone waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. Elowen hadn't moved. Vera kept looking at me, her eyes wide. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just sat. When court resumed, Cal was escorted out by bailiffs for a private deposition on the separate charity fraud case. The press outside didn't need to be told. They could read the tension on his face, the way his collar suddenly seemed too tight, the way his perfect posture finally collapsed. Elowen left shortly after. No words, no attempt at a glance. She pulled Vera along like a shopping cart with a broken wheel. I didn't follow. They spent years building a mask of dignity, I thought, standing in the hallway outside the courtroom. One truth cracked it wide open. When I stepped outside, microphones flew toward me. A young reporter from Channel 6 leaned in. "Miss Marwood, do you feel justice has been served?" I paused at the top of the steps, looked up at the heavy gray clouds shifting overhead, the kind that hold back until you least expect it. "Justice," I said slowly, "isn't a verdict. It's the day you stop apologizing for surviving." I turned to walk away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from a number I hadn't seen in years. "Thought you might want to help with something bigger." A week later, I woke up before the sun and didn't feel like I was holding my breath. The kind of morning that didn't rush you, the kind that let the coffee drip slow and the dog stretch twice before lifting his head. Max padded quietly to the kitchen behind me, his limp less noticeable now, ribs not as sharp as they were the day I found him. He sat by my side as I spooned food into his bowl and whispered, "We made it through." There are silences that ache, and then there are silences that heal. This one. It settled over my apartment like a warm quilt. My place wasn't big. 2 bedrooms, narrow windows, no view to brag about. But it was mine, not inherited, not contested, not compromised, mine. I stood by the window and sipped my coffee, watching traffic thicken below. Every car held someone chasing something. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. Not apologies, not clarity. And especially not the illusion that Elowen would someday look me in the eye and admit she'd sold me out. I opened one of my old journals, the ones I used to fill with rage. Every page used to be a battleground, ink soaked with every betrayal. Now I jotted lists, ideas, plans, maybe even a blueprint for a book, or at least a seminar. Maya Angelou once said, "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." That line lived on a post-it above my desk now. I read it every morning. That afternoon, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen since law school. "Selene?" "Becca?" I asked, surprised. "Yeah, it's been forever. Listen, I saw your testimony. The case. The way you handled it. We're working with a nonprofit now. Elder abuse, financial exploitation. We could use someone like you, not just a story. We need a strategist." I laughed, not out of joy, but that kind of laugh that happens when the timing is too perfect to be random. "I'm not looking for a stage," I told her. "Good," she said. "We don't need speakers. We need weapons that understand paperwork." We scheduled a coffee next week. Saturday came, and I wandered the farmer's market like I always used to before cancer, before courtrooms, before betrayal changed the way I measured trust. The tomatoes were overpriced. The honey guy still gave out free samples. It felt normal. Until I saw her. Elowen stood near the flower stall, a plastic bag in one hand, her free hand tucked in the crook of Vera's elbow. She looked older. Maybe it was just her shoulders. They didn't square like they used to. Vera looked up, saw me, and hesitated. Elowen turned. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth, but I stepped closer and spoke first. "I hope you never go through what you put me through," I said quietly, calmly. "But if you do, I hope someone's kinder to you than you were to me." She blinked, tried to speak. I didn't let her. I turned and walked away. No bitterness, no coldness, just done. Back at the apartment, Max curled by the couch while I sorted mail, bills, a grocery flyer, a small white envelope with no return address, no stamp. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, no greeting, no signature. "You should still check the Florida property. He left something behind." I stared at the words, reread them twice, and smiled, not because I was amused, but because I'd already made up my mind. The sun in Sarasota hit different, sharp, clean, unapologetic. It was the kind of heat that didn't ask permission before settling into your bones. I stepped out of the rental car, legal file in one hand, court order in the other. Beside me, the local real estate agent held a set of keys. Behind us, a quiet lawyer from a firm I'd never heard of in Oregon nodded like this was just another Tuesday. It wasn't. The house was tucked behind palm trees and decorative gravel, a beachside property wrapped in pretense and shell corporations. It belonged to a company Cal had registered under an LLC 4 years ago, just around the time he'd started claiming I was unfit to manage Dad's affairs. The front door opened without resistance. The air inside was cool, artificially clean, no photos, no signs of life, just polished floors and a faint scent of dust and bleach. "Cabinets are down that hall," the agent whispered, trying not to breathe too loud. "The locked one's in the office." We moved fast. This was a temporary inspection, not a seizure. If we found nothing, we'd be out in 20 minutes. But I knew better. I knew Cal. In the back room, tucked behind a sliding wood panel, was the cabinet. I handed the court order to the agent. He inserted a small crowbar under the edge, and with one pop, it came loose. Inside was a box. One box, black, sealed in 2 layers of duct tape. The lawyer slit the tape. What spilled out was everything: offshore bank ledgers, copies of emails between Cal and anonymous investors, fake appraisals tied to the Oregon property, a ledger tracking charitable donations against personal withdrawals. And then I saw them: 2 forged contracts. Both bore my name, dated during the heart of my chemo treatments, never filed but notarized and stamped like they were waiting for a better moment to be weaponized. I pulled out my phone and began photographing every page, every stamp, every trace. I sent them to Malis. Then I opened the IRS whistleblower portal and uploaded the entire folder. "He wasn't just sloppy," I said, voice low. "He was greedy." And I counted on that. Within 72 hours, the federal investigation reopened. This time it went national. News anchors used words like unprecedented fraud, systemic deception, and targeted exploitation. Photos of Cal appeared on every major outlet. Veterans Charity CEO indicted for multi-state fraud scheme. His mugshot aired beside the mission statement of the nonprofit he built on the ashes of stolen trust. Elowin wasn't spared. She was subpoenaed for her role in the estate manipulation, the medical falsifications, and aiding in the concealment of funds. Vera's name was scrubbed from every board membership she'd been groomed into. When I was called to testify again, I wore the same plain black blazer. No makeup, no jewelry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't say, "I told you so." I simply walked in, told the truth, and walked out. Someone asked afterward if I felt vindicated. I just replied, "When your truth is organized, you don't need to shout." A month later, Becca from the nonprofit called again. "We could use you," she said. "Full time. Your kind of clarity? It's rare." "I'm not ready for a spotlight," I told her. "No spotlight," she said. "Just impact." I said yes. Now I mentor women who've been financially abused by people they once trusted. I teach them how to track paper trails, how to secure documentation, how to protect their names when others try to hijack them. They turned my silence into a signature, I tell them. So I turned it into a sword. One evening, after dinner with Max curled up beside my feet, I went outside to the fire pit. The air was crisp, the kind that lets you breathe deep again. I brought out a box, one I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside were my old journals. The last of the forged documents, a few news articles I couldn't stomach seeing anymore. I placed them one by one into the flame, watched the paper curl, the ink vanish, the weight rise as smoke into the air. "He tried to sign me out of existence," I whispered. "I just rewrote the ending."